how are they connected to one another. You have what you do, how is it connected to the next step? This is what we'll be looking at. And cognitive work analysis is formative method, which means that it explains and analyzes work out from how the work can be done. Normally, we will discuss and in many types of workplace analysis, we'll either have normative analysis where we see how the work should be done. We have a way of looking at how the work should be done. This is how the work should be done, and this is how the manager wants the works to be done. Or it's descriptive, where say how the work is normally done. Different with the formative method, such as cognitive work analysis, we look at how it can be done. And this is when we are coming with effectiveness. We look at, as a safety officer, you will come to workplaces and you will meet situations which you never met before. So how will you deal with these situations? You will always be confronted with challenges which you've never seen before. Even if you are very experienced, you have very long experience and you have worked as a safety officer for long, you will at one point meet challenges, you'll meet new things which you've not met before. So how will you deal with this? And one way of dealing with this, and this is the good thing with the cognitive work analysis, you focus on identifying constraints. The limits, what limits do you have to work within? Because when you come to a workplace and you have to do your safety work, it's not free that you can do whatever you wish, but there are limits. And we look at these constraints, what we mean by constraints, and how do these constraints affect the work, and how will constraints anyway make the work effective? We'll look at that when we start discussing the work domain analysis. So cognitive work analysis is useful in designing work systems, and this can be technical system, can be whichever type of work. At the end, we'll see when we're talking about the diversity of this system, we'll see the type of works which have been done with cognitive work analysis and work domain analysis. So what are constraints? This is, it's important to understand this before we go into the work domain analysis. Constraints, according to a definition given by Neelam Naikar, one of the experts worldwide in dealing with work domain analysis and cognitive work analysis, she defined in her paper, I've given the reference there for that. Actually, this is a book, but the reference is there for those who might be interested. She defined work constraints as limits on behavior which must be respected for a system to perform effectively. So there are limits on the way we are going to do the work. There are limits. So on our behavior, on the environment the work is done, these have to be respected for us to be able to work effectively. So constraints, and one thing which is important to understand is that constraints, despite limiting the cause of action, because if anything limiting, constraints will limit what you can do. So if you can say your playing ground is limited. So constraint, despite limiting the cause of action possible, they allow for a degree of freedom of behavior. So within the constraints, if there are 10 constraints, we'll look at the constraints we're talking about here. And if you work within those constraints, you are free to do whatever you want to do. But in those constraints, in that limited perspective which you are working in, you are free. You can design a system that works for you, which so we are limited. Our actions are limited, but we have the freedom of behavior. We can do whatever we want, and this enables adaptation within the limits, as I said, and we end up with effective performance of the situation despite despite the situation being new to us, despite the situation being unknown to us, despite the other challenges which we'll face. This is what we talk about constraint. And as we go along, it will become more clear what we're talking about when we talk about constraints. So what do we put in cognitive work analysis? What do we analyze? We are talking about cognitive work analysis, but I haven't said what we analyze. So what we analyze, take an example, a work domain, our safety work. We have as I mentioned, and I've put the two diagrams with the word clouds. We have very wide range of things which we can do as part of safety work. So the work domain itself, the safety work. When we talk of safety work, there's a lot we can do. Safety work is not just giving the workers equipment only, or giving them a pep talk before they start working, or doing a risk assessment and putting a report. There's much more which needs to be done. And this is what we are going to break down and see what can we do. So we start with the work domain, very wide, a lot of different ways of doing things. Then we start putting the constraints, because there are constraints which we have to follow. The first one is work domain analysis. That's the first constraint. And work domain analysis, it identifies the domain affordances. By domain affordances, it means by what can you get out of this work? What is it you can get from safety work? Those are the domain affordances. So work domain analysis will focus on that, and this will be our main focus today. But cognitive work analysis is more than just work domain analysis. We have activities analysis, which means you analyze which activities are necessary in the system to achieve the system purposes. This means you have to identify what is the purpose of the work? What is the purpose of your safety work? And then you have to identify which activities are necessary for me to achieve that purpose. After identifying the activities, the next constraint or the next limitation is the strategy that you can use to achieve those activities. So what are the strategies? How can you perform those activities which will give you the purpose you want to attain with that with the analysis? The work you are doing, how do you want to get there? You have your purpose or your goal or your objective, whichever word you find most interesting for you. And then you identify activities, and then you need strategies to do these activities. After strategies, the next question is, who is doing what? If you are working as a safety officer, you are working alone as a consultant, but when you come to the workplace, you have to agree with those people at that workplace who is doing what. If you say, this is my plan, these are the activities, this is the strategy we should follow, then you have to assign people who is going to take part, who is going to do which part of work, what part are you yourself going to do. And this goes with every other work. When if you are a manager of a big manufacturing company, you have to have activities, you have to have strategies, and then you assign work to the employers. You will do this work, you will do this work. Maybe tomorrow you will rotate so that different people do different works. But you have to make to organize the work. So these are limitations, because in giving work to the people, you have to give them according to what they know. We have to have a competence analysis. How the work demands of the system can be met given human cognitive capabilities and limitations. Not everybody can do everything. So you are limited with what people can do. Some are experts on this area, some are expert on other areas. So what can they do? This is a limitation. It's a constraint. So we see we have 5 constraints. First, the work domain. What are affordances? What do you want to achieve with this work? That's the first limitation. Then, okay, now we've passed the first limitation. We know what we want to do. Then how are we going to do it? The activities, and then the strategy, and then who is going to do with what work, and do they have the competence to do this work? So now put this into safety work perspective, and we'll see what we can do. Once you've gone through all these limitations, as I mentioned, then you are free to do the work, or you are free to choose the behavior that works best for you and for that system. That's why you see these arrows are going in different directions and different angles. You can try one system, and you say if it's not working, you can try another one. But within these limitations, you have the freedom to do the work the way you see fit. But all the time you have to think about that you have this competence to do this work, or you have the people to do this work. The strategy is in place, the activities are known. But when all that is done, what you do, you are free to do. This is what is meant by the cognitive work analysis. Gives you the freedom of behavior within the constraints. So we have the constraints, and then we are free to do what we want to do. I hope this is understood. In this presentation, our focus will only look on work domain analysis, because this is the most important. Once you've got the work domain analysis in place, you'll see that the other things will follow trend. It will be easy to identify which activities you have to put in place. We'll see that, and you'll see how easy it is to put strategy in place. It doesn't have to be in that order that you do work domain analysis, and then activities, and then strategies. But you can do work domain analysis, and then you have to come back and see, is it working for me? Do you have the competence? And then maybe go back to work domain analysis and do it again. So it's an iterative process which you have to do continuously. So as I mentioned, now we will focus on work domain analysis, and this is one of the analysis in cognitive work analysis. So it comprises of 5 phases. When we do a work domain analysis, we have to do 5 phases. The first one is domain purpose. We have to identify the goal, as I mentioned. What is the objective of my safety work? What do I want to achieve with this safety work? I'm a consultant, I'm a safety engineer, I'm a safety manager. My work is safety work. So what do I want to achieve? This is the first one, and this we have to identify. After identifying the purpose, we have to identify the values and principles. These are the measure of success of the objective. We set our goals, so how can we measure that we have attained the goals? We must have a system of measuring. We must have a way of assessing that we've met the goal. Otherwise, we are doing zero work if we cannot assess if we are meeting the goals we've planned. After having a system of measuring the attainment of their objective, we have to look at purpose-related functions. So what is it necessary? What is necessary for me to do? What is necessary for the company to do to achieve the goals? We have a system of measuring, but what do we have to do? What are the factors? What are the functions which are necessary to achieve the values and principles and the goals of the work? After that, we have to look at the object-related functions. These are physical processes. What activities I have to put in place? Maybe somebody will think, what is the difference between functions and activities? We'll see the difference in just a a few seconds, we'll see the difference. What function, what we talk about functions and what are activities. We'll see. So activities are related also to physical objects, and that's the fifth of the phases of the work domain analysis. So the fifth is the physical objects or physical process attributes. So here we can say maybe we need some instruments, but what type of instruments do we need? We'll have to look at what activities do we want to do. And to decide what activities we want to do, we have to look at what functions do we need to accomplish in order to have our goal, to achieve our goal. So let's look at this domain, this work domain analysis, and look at a little bit more details of how we can go from the domain purpose to the value, to purpose related functions, to the objects, and to the physical, to the object related functions, and to the physical objects. And I hope you will also see the difference between activities and function as we go along. So we start with our work domain analysis of our safety work. That's our work domain, and we want to do analysis. So we have the five phases: the domain purposes, identification, the values and principles, purpose-related functions, object-related functions, and physical objects. This is what we call abstraction hierarchy. It's an hierarchy. You go from top to bottom. So and it's flow. So it's a hierarchy, but it's an abstraction. It's an abstract. You don't have details. You just have the skeleton. Now we'll try to put on details, and this is not. It's not. Whatever we are. I'll be presenting here. It's an example of how you can do it. You will, if you do it for a specified workplace, you will have different elements than those which I'll be putting here. But the point here is to show how you go about doing the work domain analysis, so that you improve effectiveness. So you start with the domain purpose. First you say you identify what is the domain purpose. What do you want to achieve? So I've taken these two, for example. You want to achieve conducive work environment at that specific workplace, you as a safety officer, and you want to have a functional occupational safety and health management system. So two functions. You can have much more, many than these. You will decide as a safety officer based on what is happening at the workplace you want to improve the safety on. So I've taken these two as an example, just to illustrate. And as I mentioned, whatever comes under you, if you do your own work domain analysis, you'll have different, or maybe some will be the same, but this is just for illustration. So we've decided that we need to have conducive work environment, good work environment, and to have a functional management system. So how can we measure this? We come maybe to these measures, that when you have reduced absenteeism, that people are more at work than they are sick. So we've reduced the sickness. People work more. They can come to work and they're not at home because they're sick. If we can reduce this, if this was a problem that the company has a lot of absenteeism because of injuries. So if we reduce injuries and we reduce absenteeism, and then we have good workflow, we have hazards, the number of hazards are reduced. Maybe we use more automation along the way, and we have less of manual work. And for functional management system, maybe the manager will be happy if you also will reduce the cost. So we have what the principles that we can use to measure if we have attained conducive work environment, and we've attained functional occupational safety and health management system. And you see the red lines going from the conducive work environment to reduce absenteeism. This means We can measure conducive work environment if we see that we have reduced absenteeism, we have reduced the number of injuries, we have good workflow, the number of hazards are reduced. If we are using chemicals, we've reduced the number of chemicals we use. So the number of hazards are reduced. We see that our work environment is conducive. And on the other side, on the functional management system, we see that we have similar things will also tell us that we have a functional system. When we have reduced absenteeism, we reduce injuries, and the workflow and the hazards are reduced, and we reduce costs, that we have a functional system. But you see that good workflow maybe is not a functional or management system of OSH. So we don't have a connection between the functional management system to good workflow. And at the same time, we see that reducing cost is not part of conducive work environment. Then we don't have any connection between conducive work and reduced work costs. So let's take, so this we are going to continue to do this. Now we are going to the next stage, and we have to pick what functions do we have to have, what functions are necessary for us to reduce absenteeism, what functions are necessary for us to reduce injuries, what functions are necessary for us to have good flow of work, and so on and so forth. I'll take one of these at a time, and then we'll see how the system develops. So let's take reducing absenteeism. What do we have to have? What do we have to put in place to reduce absenteeism? We have to have workplace adaptation, so that people can come to the workplace and work. People who pregnant women, for example, if we're working with chemicals and we have pregnant women, we don't expect them to work in places in the area where they are exposed to chemicals, or even not pregnant people, just normal men working with chemicals. We don't want to expose them to radiations and chemicals that will affect their reproductivity, for example. So we have to have adaptation of the workplace so that we prevent such exposures. We need to have work organizations. Maybe we have to rotate the workers somehow from one point to another, so that you don't work on the same point every day. If you work lifting things, so that in ergonomics, you have to change position so that you can do a different work, so that you don't do repeated work. We need safety discourse. We need to talk about issues. We need to talk about the mental well-being. All this will contribute in reducing absenteeism. We need to have a risk assessment to see how the situation is. This is what we need to do, and we could add more and more and more based on your assessment. And then we go to reduce injuries, and we do the same. And we go to workflow, and we do the same. And we go to hazards, and we do hazard reduction, and we do the same. But let's continue. Let's take one more and go one step down, one step further, and look at object-related functions. What are these? What do we need to do here? So now already you've seen that we have connections, that if you want to have conducive work environment, you have to reduce absenteeism. How do we reduce absenteeism? By workplace adaptation, by work organization, by safety discourse, by risk assessment, by having risk assessment. Already here we can see what we need what we need as the domain purpose, how we can do it, and what we need to do. So we have what, how, what. We start with what. What do we want? We want conducive work environment. How can we achieve that? We have to reduce absenteeism. What do we do to reduce absenteeism? We have to have workplace adaptation. This is what the connections between the squares, between the functions, and what from one point to the other. These are called means ends connections, or means end relationship. Means to that end. Means to that end. So you'll all, if you start here, if we feel this, and you start to reduce, we'll see that when we've done. Let's take one more step down and see what we can do. Let's take risk assessment. You can take any of these because you have to do for each one. So let's take risk assessment. What do we need to do a risk assessment? We have to collect data. We have to know the place we are going to do a risk assessment. You cannot do a risk assessment without knowing the place we are doing a risk assessment for. So we have to collect data. We need a lot of information, and we need training. Those people who are going to do the risk assessment, and the people who are going to do the risk assessment for, they need to have some kind of information. They need to have some kind of training. We need to be able to keep records of our risk assessment so that we can come back to it in the next year when we're doing the same and see what did we do last time, what can we do now. And we must have a system of feedback and reporting. We need this to be able to do risk assessment. So we here I've done risk assessment, but we have to do the same for workplace adaptation. What do we need to do to have workplace adaptation? So let's go further down and see what do we get in physical objects. So we take information and training, for example. So what do we do? What do we need to have if we are going to have information and training? It means we need training facilities. Maybe we need written instructions that will go through during the training. We need to have a system of communication and system of information so that we can inform as part of the training. Now, let's go back to conducive work environment and take one channel all the way down. We need conducive work environment. To do that, we need to have reduced absenteeism, and that's the way we can measure that we have conducive work environment. And to do that, we need to do a risk assessment. To do a risk assessment, we need to have information, and we need to have training. And to be able to have effective training and information dissemination, we need training facilities, we need written instructions, we need communication facilities. Now you can do that for all these squares in every single one of the phases of the work domain analysis. It's a lot of work, but you get a full picture of what you are supposed to do and how you are supposed to do and with what you are supposed to do it. And if you see, for example, on the second one, you have connections between the top level and the second level. You have connection only on reduce absenteeism to the next level. But we need to have connections. Nothing should be hanging. Nothing should be hanging. Everything should have connection to the next, to the lower level. So we cannot have something which is hanging, which is not connected to the next level. Otherwise, it's not supposed to be there. So if we go on and doing the same with what we did with reduced absenteeism, we do the same for reduced injuries, we do the same for good workflow, we do the same for hazards reduction, we do the same for reduced costs. Maybe we'll have to add some more. We'll get something like this. This is what I did, and I end up with something like this. So you see, we've added some, we have to build confidence. We have to identify areas of deficiency that we can correct. Now look at this. We build confidence. When we say we build confidence, how do you build confidence? Now this is a function, but to build confidence, we need to have some records so that we can know what we need to advise the workers on. And we have a system of feedback that they tell us what they feel. That's the way we can build confidence. So the giving feedback and reporting, it's an activity, but building confidence is a function. And the functions are completed by doing the activities. So we want to do a safety discourse. We want to discuss on psychosocial work environment. So that's safety discourse in this way. It's a function. But how do we do that function? We have to have the activities, and the activities which will do that function is that we have to collect data, we have to get information on training, and we have a system of feedback. If you see the black lines from the safety discourse going to data collection, information, and feedback. So that is how we fulfill the function. So these, what we have here as object-related functions, these are the activities. And these are what we'll analyze in the activities analysis, in the cognitive work analysis. So data collection, how then we analyze, how do we collect the data? Exposure prevention, how will we prevent exposure? We have to analyze how we are going to do that. And then after that, and we put strategies in place. So you see, the most important part of the cognitive work analysis is to do the work domain analysis. You can have several functions, and the more functions the more purposes, the domain purpose, the more purposes you have, the more complex this will become. But when you pick one and one, you take the first, you have 10 purposes, which is just a lot. It's not possible to have that. But you take the first one, and then you go through all this and identify, for this purpose to be accomplished, we have to do this, and we have to do this. We have to have these functions. We have to have these activities. We have to have these objects. Excuse me. So this is what we do when we're doing the work domain analysis. Then we take the other functions. So we're not doing everything at the same time, and we're not only doing part of it. We're not coming to a workplace and we say, okay, we've been having a lot of injuries, and we have problems, and we have a lot of sick people. The first thing for many of us, maybe we'll think of, okay, let's do a risk assessment. Okay, we do a risk assessment, but we've jumped to risk assessment. What do we want to achieve with this risk assessment? We want to reduce hazards. By reducing hazards, what are we achieving? We are achieving conducive work environment, or we're achieving functional system of management. So jumping to risk assessment, we're jumping to functions, but risk assessment is what we want to do. But how do we want to do? We want to collect data, we have to get information. And what do we achieve by doing a risk assessment? We reduce hazards. So you see, you can go up or down, but you always have to go up to a connection, or you go down to a connection. So wherever you start with what, and then you go to how, and then you go to what again. So what do you want to achieve? What do you want to do? How are you going to do that? And what do you need to do it? This is what you put in your work domain analysis. And the more you do this and you practice it, and you become more competent, and you see that it becomes more complex, but it becomes more interesting, because you see there are connections to, you need to do the same thing to achieve different purposes. So if I can show you an example of now a real situation which I worked on for a very long time, and this is maybe it's for audit work, and you can see how complex it becomes. This is for audit work, where the purpose was ensure safe working environment, and then ensuring justifiable working conditions, supporting health promoting workplaces, and cracking down on non-serious enterprises. And then you get all these values which you have to deal with, and you have so many purpose related. And I know maybe somebody will think, oh, these are very general, they are very generic. what do we have to go down much lower than this. This is just for demonstration, but I will show you something which you have to do, and this will be just as important. And we go to the next step. We talk about abstraction decomposition. We remember the hierarchy we started with. We take the company. This is what I've shown in the previous slides, is what you do, the hierarchy for the whole company. So now I've taken only two of the principles, and I've taken conducive work environment. This is what you do general for the company, for the entire workplace. And I've taken only two, but normally we'll have more. So I've taken only two. So this is what you do for the workplace. But the workplace, let's say you are coming to a workplace where there are 5 different departments. This is the general thinking you want to achieve for the workplace. So what about the company, the different departments? This is where we go to decomposition. Now we break this down. We go to decomposition. We move towards the right, and then we say, okay, in the sections or in the department, what do we want to achieve? It could be the same goals which you had in the same goals and the same principles you had for the company. You now have to transfer this into the department. Like, let's say if you want good workflow. If you want good workflow, we need the team, the people working there to cooperate. So under department, one value will be team cooperation or team responsibility. And then we come to risk assessment and safety discourse. What will be the need for the department? What do we have to do for the department to have safety discourse or risk assessment? We need to have control practices within that department. And you do this, you go on and looking at the department now, maybe one department will be different from the other. You see, you are building a mental picture throughout of the process by breaking this very complex web of duties which you have to do, which you cannot just solve by doing a risk assessment, but you have to do many other things. So you're breaking it down piece to piece to see, what can I do? What can other people do? What can the manager do? What do we need to do? In the department, you'll have different people doing different things. Then you have to look at the individual worker. How does the individual worker have to contribute? They must have a personal contribution to the safety work you are doing. Otherwise, if they don't have a personal contribution, things might not work for the entire department. We always say safety is my responsibility, or safety is individual's responsibility. So what is the contribution they can make in the work that will contribute in the team cooperation, that will contribute to reducing injuries? So you have to look at the personal contribution of that individual. Maybe to do that, they have to be informed on practices. We talk about information and training generally for the company. And then we break down, we need that individual. This individual has to have a specified training. So for the company, we say we need training, but what do the individuals in different departments need to know? They have different level of competence. We have to go to their level. What do they need to know, each and one of them? Understanding instruction. Do they understand the instructions? So we have to go down to their level, and maybe have to have tailored instructions for a group of individuals in the same department, and then so that their contribution. So we start with the composition. We start with the company, which we do an overall assessment, and then we have to break it down to the sections and department. This is what we call the composition. So the hierarchy is fixed. We go down from the main purposes to values to purpose-related functions, physical objects, and then we have to go to the decomposition and look at, okay, if there are several departments, do these departments have several hazards? Maybe not. So what do I need to do for this department? And then in the department, you have different people doing different work. It's not the same risk for everybody in the same department. So what do each one of these have to do so that in the end, everybody has contributed and the workplace is safe, it's conducive, we have conducive work in environment. So it's a lot of mental picture of what you have to do and how far you have to go and what you have to do. So every time I hear somebody, whenever there's an issue in a workplace and somebody says, the first thing you do is risk assessment. Risk assessment is good, but if we look at in this way, with risk assessment will come under purpose-related function. Somebody will put risk assessment somewhere else, but I put it under purpose-related function. So if we're to do risk assessment, what do we want to achieve with that risk assessment? We must have a goal to connect with that risk assessment. And then we go down and look at how do we do a risk assessment? What do we need to be able to do a risk assessment? Does this risk assessment we are going to do, will it support the purpose of the domain purpose we want to achieve? So we always have to go up and down, and sometimes you have to do it time and again and again and again and again until we get it right. The bigger the companies, the more complex the risks are, the more complex the hazards are, the more the need for breaking it down into this way, so that we know a step, we know the functions which you have to have in place, and we know how to go about fulfilling these functions. And these functions, when they are done, we can measure the purpose, if the purpose is attained or not. So to enable us to do the decomposition, maybe we need sub goals. We have goals which were made for the company, but we need to break down to much easier and smaller goals for the departments and for the individual, for the sections. So I take, for example, safety and health discourse. And you can break down it, engaging in dialogue with workers and employers, discuss the significance of OSH practices, motivate promotion of workers' mental health and well-being. So now you're breaking down, because different people will need different discourse. Advocate for workers' good psychosocial work environment. If you look at the correction of deficiency, just by helping them comprehend implementation shortcomings, that yeah, you have a problem here, you have a problem here, and we're talking about safety. Investigate and address incidences which have happened, near misses. What can we do with near misses? But then you're going to departments and to individuals. Correct the interpretation of relevant regulatory provisions. Maybe they have a different understanding in one section and another section. So we cannot have these differences and then have and expect an overall system that will be functioning properly. There will be a problem. Maybe they only need guidance on attaining optimal level of compliance. Maybe they understand the relevant, they understand the provisions properly, but they only need guidance on how to work on it. So, but this you get down when you do the decomposition. And you can have these subsidiary functions for all the purpose-related functions. In the middle part of the work domain analysis, you can have these sub-goals and subsidiary functions all the way, so that you come closer and closer and closer to where the risks are, to where the problems are, to where you need to make changes and what changes you need to make, and what goals you need to achieve. So just to wind up, and I know this is very complicated. It's not something you can just be an expert in half an hour or 45 minutes presentation. But the idea that you can think of what you can do, you can read about it, and then you can start building your own. Start in small scale. start identifying the purposes and the measurements, how to measure achievement of these purposes, and what do I need to do, and how can I do that? Are there any physical objects? And build slowly from one section to other, then we'll make progress. So just to show you how and where work domain analysis or cognitive work analysis have been used earlier. In safety work, it has been used all from nuclear power stations. You know, what safety work can be, how can these people working in nuclear power station work safely, to manufacturing, to simple thing as, not simple thing, but to more down to earth things like behavior of workers. All, so you can see how complex work in nuclear power station is. So you can use work domain analysis to identify the affordances, and you can use it for cleaning work, very low work. You can still use it, although it's not complex. Cleaning work is not complex, but the risk, the safety work involved in cleaning work is complex. In military, they've used work domain analysis and cognitive work analysis in general, from finding safe passages for jet fighters. So they make a work domain analysis, and they break down it into these small elements, and then they find out that this is the safe passage for the jet fighters. So to avoid radar, to avoid missiles. To controlling of submarines. How do you control submarines? How do you run submarines? To anti-missile systems. This is how complex, you can imagine how complex these systems are. Aviation, in determining flight path, airlines operations. Then you come to hospitals. They've used, experts of work domain analysis have used this method of assessment, of analysis, to organize how to analyze how to organize cardiac surgery follow-ups. So people who have had a cardiac surgery and they're sent home, so how do you follow them up? They use this method. You can see how versatile this method is, to simple methods on patients falling from hospitals. In some hospitals in Canada, they were having problems with patients falling from their beds. So they wanted to identify what are the problems. Why do patients fall from their beds? So they started doing a work domain analysis and cognitive work analysis to see what is it done, what happens, what can we do to prevent patients from falling from their beds. In road traffic, imagine you use a work domain analysis to determine how you can operate your vehicle to reduce the fuel use, to automation of trucks, to traffic lights. How do you control traffic lights with people crossing, and with public communications like trams and buses, and then you have private cars. Who should go fast? They use work domain analysis. In sports, they've used. I know I read a paper in Australia where they use work domain analysis to analyze netball matches, to come with the best strategy for winning matches in netball. I've tried to look for ways in which safety work, the work of the safety officer, the work of the safety personnel. I've tried to look and find how they've managed to use work domain analysis and cognitive work analysis. I found one article, and it was concerning exposure limit values, how you can assess exposure limit values, and how people work with exposure limit values. So that's the only one I managed to find. Maybe if some of you start searching, maybe you'll get more, but I managed only one. So there's a lot of potential for safety work to be to take use of the work domain analysis and the cognitive work analysis and break down and get the details of the work we do instead of doing just a risk assessment and be satisfied with that. There's a lot of potential as safety officers. We can gain a lot from this system of analysis, and we have to work towards that and get an understanding of what it is and build on it and work with it. So to conclude, safety work is complex work. We know that, and we have to do a lot of work. The more the complex the workplace is, the complex the safety work is. So analysis of safety work is very wide and demanding, as we've mentioned. So with cognitive analysis, we can get an understanding of the work, proper understanding of the work, and we know the work, once we know the work inside out, and we've known the affordances, what we can get from the work through work domain analysis. We have the abstraction hierarchy and the decomposition, where we'll go to the little details of the individual or the section or the department contra what we need for the entire company as a general. The means ends relationship identified in the hierarchy. They tell you what to do, what you want to do, how you can do it, and what you need to do to do it. So it's when we do that and we are working within the constraints which we've mentioned, then we are free to do the work, and we will do effective work because we've got the little detail of what the work entails. And this will support us in building systems and strategies that can enable us to have the most effective system and the most effective design of the work for the workplaces which we work. This is what I had, and thank you all for listening. It's a lot of information, a lot of work, but I will open for some questions and comments and discussion. I've put in this slide the website, the address of our website, where you can go and look for the previous webinars, and you can read. You can look at the videos, and the presentations are there. And if there's anything you want to contact us, we have the email. The presentation will be available also from the same site, and the recording when our host has done some work with it. So thank you for listening, and we are open for questions now.
Yes, thank you, Abdulkadir. I think for the first time we've gone past 1 hour with a presentation, but I can understand when Abdulkadir is very passionate about something, he can get carried away. And I felt
we started late. We started late.
Yeah, nonetheless, we did pass the hour mark. But as I was saying, I can understand, and because the topic was interesting, I didn't want to do it injustice by stopping you prematurely. But anyway, now for the audience, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to write them down. If you want to contribute something as well, just raise your hand, and then I will unmute you, and then you will be able to contribute. But we have some messages here from Isa Premji. He was asking, can we get the presentations? Yes, as Abdulkadir has said, we'll be sharing the PDF online to our website, as well as a recording of this this video of this whole meeting, and then we'll be sharing those on our website and through email as well. James Osoro, he says very informative. Please share the presentation. Again, same thing. We'll be sharing on the website. Again, if anyone still has any question, I would suggest you bring them forward right now. Now is the time. But I think that was a very informative presentation. It was very deep. As I mentioned before, it was very deep. It took a while, but I hope everyone learned from that.
It's complex and but useful.
Yes. I think it will take people a while to digest. But as I mentioned, you guys will have all the time in the world because we'll be posting this online. You can watch it over and over as many times as you like. Thank you very much. Very informative and useful from Isa Premji. Thank you as well, Isa. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us for the meeting. Anybody else with something to add?
It was very clear to everybody.
Clearly. Mm-hmm. Anyway, as a parting shot, I've been doing some reading recently, and there's this one book I think everyone would find very useful, but for safety officers, you'd find it even just as useful or even more. There's this book called Power of Habit. It's very eye-opening, both on a personal level, on organizational level, and so on. I think it's something everyone. I think it should be maybe mandatory for everyone to read that book because it talks so much about how behaviors actually define an organization. So you would find that basically you'd find that most organizations define themselves by goals, but in truth, an organization is a composition of those behaviors that the management allows to or fosters within the organization. So if these behaviors are good, you would find that they bring good results. If these behaviors are not that good, you find in the long run they would affect the organization, and fixing them will take time. So I think the book does a better job of explaining the whole thing, and it goes into detail of how some organizations failed to guarantee, in fact, safety of its workers and safety of the people it served. Particularly, it mentioned an accident that happened on the Piccadilly underground station. There was an explosion that happened because of neglect, and this neglect was caused by basically behaviors that did not foster the need to worry about occupational safety and health. So that was just one of the case studies within that book. There are so many more, and some of them even just touch on issues of mental health and so on. So I think that would be a very nice book. I would suggest it to anyone, and I think it's very relevant for safety officers. I think there's not much else to say, unless Abdul Qadir, you have one last thing to wrap up with.
I've said what I needed to say, but I'll just say thank you for those who are still here, and if there are any things you want clarity on, just send us an email and we'll try to answer. And as Imran mentioned earlier, we are planning to have this as the last of the series, but we still want to put a conference together. We are working on it, and we'll let you know when this will be. It will be probably towards the end of November, but we'll let you know, and the information will be there. So we hope to see you in that conference as well. Otherwise, thank you for coming. Thank you for spending your evening with us, and we look forward to see you again in another event.
Yes, indeed. So thank you everyone. Thank you very much. Very informative and useful, Isa. We've shared the email. I will assume you want us to add you to the subscribers list, and I will do so. So thank you, everyone, and good night. Yes, please. Yes. Okay. Okay. Okay, guys. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.